Join former FBI senior forensic examiners Becky Passmore and Stacy Eldridge as they dig into the world of digital forensics, one bite at a time. Now leading their own consulting firms and educating the next generation of cyber sleuths. These badass babes of digital forensics bring sharp insight, real-world case experience, and a dose of humor to the bits and bytes that build today's investigations. From deep dives into business email compromise and ransomware attacks, Becky's specialty, to cracking the complexities of iPhone forensics, Stacy's obsession. This podcast delivers insider knowledge for professionals, students, and true crime techies alike. If you've ever wondered what really happens when the digital trail is all that's left, tune in and start parsing the truth.
Welcome back to Parsing the Truth, one bite at a time. Becky and I are excited to bring you the answers to our most asked question, and that is, how do you break into digital forensics?
Right, so we are going to address the concerns of job seekers and help you get set up for success to land your first digital forensics job.
And we're also coming out this with 20 years of experience, so we know what it takes to actually work in digital forensics, and certainly what we're saying here today is greatly influenced by that. We don't want you to finally get that job and then find out you don't have the chops to keep it.
Yeah, and we're also going to talk about the degree programs, the current degree programs, the university level degree programs. And we're just going to also give you some ideas about what to look for in current job postings, as well as what to ask for, because there are different levels of job postings that you will be able to see and want to know how to apply for those.
Exactly. So we are going to kick it off with those core skills, those competencies that you have to have. And I'm going to start it off with some of the technical know-how you have to have. Now, the first thing I'm going to say you have to know how to do is know how to use a Windows computer. Now, I know some of you might be laughing, but it is seriously important to be able to know how to use a Windows computer. And this becomes more important now because, one, a lot of people are using MacBooks or just like iPads or tablets as their primary computing device. So they don't have any Windows computer experience, or maybe you're using Chromebooks in high school. So you go to the college level, now we're expecting you to use a Windows computer. The other part of this is nearly all of the forensic software you're going to be using runs only on a Windows computer. And to get it to work, there's some advanced things you're going to have to do in Windows to make sure that all of your software is working correctly. Becky, what do you want to start off with here?
No, you bring up a great point there with a Windows computer, because if you're going to use a Mac, you're going to have to know how to, if that tool even runs in a Mac. So there's definitely being able just to use a Windows computer and understand the basics of it. Technology is key here. And as I always tell Stacy, whenever we're trying to get something done, we're 80% troubleshooting and 20% working. I mean, it's literally what we did tonight with trying to get our recording studio going. 80% troubleshooting, 20% working. And I say that in the sense that I always am trying to help people figure out what's wrong, why they can't see what they're expecting to see. So there's a lot that goes into it, and the use and knowledge of computer and how things work is key here.
And that means you really have to dive into it. And so that means at the end of the day, you're going to need to know a little bit of everything. You're going to have some fundamental base knowledge in a lot of different areas. And a lot of this I feel should be covered in, it's going to come up under just general computer classes or information technology, however they're branding it. But the things you're going to want to become familiar with is like hardware, because there still is some taking apart of computers, and you need to know the different things that a computer can do. And then jumping on top of that would be like networking. How are these things communicating with each other?
So that would be like what you and I got with CompTIA's A+ certification and CompTIA's Net Plus certification back in the day.
Yeah, and those are still two great certifications to get just because of all of that knowledge you're going to acquire. I don't really tend to see it a lot specifically called out on job listings, but sometimes they just say, we want you to have a certification. This is at a good price point, and I think you get a lot of bang for your buck. The last thing I want to mention in the technical area is programming classes. Now, you're not going to necessarily be a programmer and writing your own forensic software to do XYZ. I mean, certainly there are people out there that are doing it, but the reason I think programming is so valuable is because there's just so many weird things that you see when you're working in these cases. And I think it helps you in several areas. One is that critical thinking and problem solving and troubleshooting. Like, how can I make this program run? Where is the missing comma? Where is the missing semicolon? Stuff like that. Or as I always did when I used to be a programmer, why is this working when it shouldn't be? Like, you think it shouldn't work, but it is. So the last thing it's going to do, though, is help you recognize patterns. And so it's all adding into that. So programming classes are typically an elective that you can choose somewhere along the path. Otherwise, there's all sorts of great resources to get some free programming learning under your belt. There's also all sorts of books. Back in the day, I liked to use the Sam's Teach Yourself whatever language in 24 hours. That gave some great fundamental stuff to just bang out that code. Now, there's some more technical know-how for sure. Becky, what are some other technical things you think you need to be able to do?
Right. No, I think you have to have some understanding about databases and how databases work. I think you have to have some general knowledge of cybersecurity and information security. Both of those are very critical because if you can understand what is trying to be protected and what alerts are being signaled and how those endpoint monitoring detection systems or their intrusion prevention systems, the firewalls, the VPNs, if you have a little bit of knowledge about those, it helps with trying to put together an investigation by having an understanding of cybersecurity and information security. And then when it comes to data science, there's that you want to be able to think about it as parsing or analyzing, visualizing data. There's quite a few courses out there for data analytics, data science that lays out the data for it to be visualized. A lot of our forensic tools do the same thing nowadays when they lay out a timeline or a connection to other accounts, to other users. You really have some understanding of what that visualizing of that data looks like. And then in general, Excel skill, just being able to use Excel, have an understanding of how to take some data and populate it into a Excel spreadsheet and let the Excel spreadsheet tell the story.
Yeah, and in Excel, it's really a lot of like looking at logs or a set of data, and then you need to be able to manipulate it so you can filter through it. And are you just getting down to a specific date, or are you trying to find anomalies like what's the highest, what's the lowest? And so it's sorting and things like that. And then sometimes you are building those visualizations off of it, making some of those charts and graphs just to help you see and understand that data. So it's not all just, I'm going to read Word documents and look at pictures. Certainly you do that, but that's really just the surface level stuff you're going to do in digital forensics. You really have to connect all of the dots. And I think, in speaking of connecting the dots, that's kind of where we get into some of the soft skills. So Becky, do you want to get touchy-feely and talk about some soft skills that we got to have?
Soft skills. When I'm teaching my students at the college and I explain that you do have to get up and you do have to present a paper in front of the class because you have to have you don't have to not be nervous because we're all nervous when we do it, but you have to learn how to communicate orally. You might be pulled into a meeting where you're going to have to talk about your skill sets, talk about what happened, tell the story. And if you can't communicate orally, then this is not the job for you. And then communication in writing is it's just so important. Being able to articulate your findings, being able to communicate those to a juror, to investigators, to executives. All of it has to be done in writing and orally. So that is probably, in my opinion, the biggest soft skill that's going to have to be developed by people looking for a job in digital forensics. What about you? What do you think is next?
I think the other part of it is critical thinking. And the way I like to explain critical thinking, I don't know if everyone's had one of these classes, maybe hopefully you will at some time, but you've got to do flow charting, and maybe you're talking about it aloud in class, but you're not flow charting a computer process. You're flow charting an everyday process, such as making a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. And so you start with, oh, okay, well, put peanut butter on the bread. And your teacher's like, no, you didn't go far enough back. And then you're like, get the bread out of the bag. And you have to keep going backwards and backwards all the way to like going to the grocery store and buying the bread and the peanut butter. Don't forget to pay for it. Don't forget to drive back home. And the reason they're having you do that is just to think through all of the different steps to get your mind flowing, to just think differently. And that's part of connecting the dots is, okay, what about this? Where can it lead? How does this thing link to this thing? Or maybe it doesn't link to it. It's just two anomalies. There's such a thing as that for sure. And then, Becky, I don't know, we kind of touched this already, but certainly the problem solving and troubleshooting, so big.
Right. And that goes from what you were just talking about, that critical thinking skill to problem solving, right? You're constantly going to try and figure something out. You're never going to be handed a case that is going to be so easy for you to do that you did not have to solve some problem or use your critical thinking skills. And again, going back to 80% of our time is spent troubleshooting versus 20% of work or analysis. And the troubleshooting goes down to, my computer's not working, it's not connecting to the network, it's not the tool is not populating like it should. My findings aren't showing up. My tagging isn't working. My reporting isn't working. It's constantly trying to figure things out. You have to know a lot of what is normal and what is not. And, just laying that out through a foundation and trying to understand what is normal and versus abnormal. I mean, just not, you don't necessarily know everything that a person is doing on a computer, but you can start to develop a profile of that individual and use your problem solving techniques and skills to understand what was being done. And it's just, a lot of that's coming from some fundamental knowledge that you have when you start.
Absolutely. And I think with the getting to know normal, that might sound very overwhelming, especially as you're starting out. And so when I was starting out, I found the easiest way to look for the abnormal was to look for like statistical anomalies. To a certain extent, pictures are a certain size. Videos obviously can vary in size, but you're not expecting to see like a 500 gig video. And so if you see something that's named with like, a video extension and it's 500 gigs on your 1 terabyte hard drive, let's look at that first. Is it something, a compressed container that's being disguised, and can you dig into that? So, I'm always like, what is so big? What is so small? What do I have the most of? What do I have the least of? And all I'm doing there is just sorting. I'm sorting by size or file extension, locations, stuff like that. And that's why it's good to work through a lot of data sets when you do it in school or on your own, so you can kind of just play with all of these different things and figure out how you like to look for data, because there is no checklist. Like, I begged and begged for a checklist when I was let loose on my own. I'm like, isn't there a checklist to just help me solve this crime? And they're like, No, there is no checklist. We will not give you one. And that's for a lot of different reasons. And you know, I think a lot of us kind of made our own checklists as we got out there and started because the fear of missing something. But not too long into it, you realize like this checklist is not getting me too far in this case. And you've just really got to do it. It comes with practice, and you got to ask your peers questions. That's just how it works, to be honest. So don't have this huge expectation that you can do it all on your own as soon as you're hired, because that's just not reality. And so I think that will hopefully help you with expectations. And I think that might even be something that you would want to be able to verbalize to an employer during a job interview, because they might ask that question. And then you look for reputable digital forensics resources to give you those answers. There's also, you know, phone a friend, ask your colleague, peers, you know, and that sort of stuff. And then so just being able to verbalize that That's in an interview can give you huge bonus points. And then again, you're talking, they're getting to see how you can verbalize stuff off the cuff. So next up, we have degrees. There's all sorts of degrees that you can get out there. And right now we're just focusing on your bachelor degree, that first degree you're going to get from college. Becky, do you want to kick us off with that?
Right. So when we're talking about bachelor's degrees, my bachelor's degree is in information technology. And back in the day, that's pretty much what we had available. We had computer science or information technology. Going back to some of the skills that we were talking about and what Stacy was saying about programming, I had a couple of programming classes. They weren't my favorite, but I took them because I have an understanding of what programs look like now, and what programming code and how it works. So I have that knowledge. So when you're taking classes, when you're getting a degree, don't focus on the degree title, and don't necessarily even trust that degree title is telling you what you're getting. So Stacy and I both teach, and at the University of Arkansas at Little Rock, we have a cybersecurity bachelor's degree, where in our bachelor's degree, we teach a variety of courses on network security, system security, software security. We teach on a cloud security class. We teach digital forensics. We teach a variety of courses, and a lot of our concepts overlap because in cybersecurity and in digital forensics, they are going to overlap. So pay attention to the classes, the actual classes that you have to take. And if you're taking a bunch of business classes, or if you're taking a bunch of criminal justice classes, don't just focus on those courses. Look at the computer classes as well, because the business classes are going to teach you some techniques, and the criminal justice classes are going to teach you some other concepts that you need, but you want to be able to know what the computer classes you're taking are going to be as well.
And then, Becky, to wrap up the degrees and the university level education, the one thing I want to stress here is that part of what you're doing by getting this degree and going to school is learning how to learn. So once you have that ability down, then it's going to be a lot easier for you to pick up new things and learn how to do digital forensics with a different tool or a different type, like you're moving from hard drives onto cell phones and things like that. And I'd say the last part of it would also be learning how to express your ideas, whether it's verbally or in writing. The next thing we want to move on to is certifications. Do you need them? From what we've seen in most of the job postings here is they are looking to see if you have at least one. And part of the reason they're doing that is to see if you can complete something hard, time consuming outside of a school environment that you have to do on your own. It shows that you can do something to the end. And one thing you might want to look out for as you're taking some of these degree programs is see if any of the classes offer you the ability to pick up a certification along the way, whether they're just prepping you for the test or perhaps the test is included. Now, there are different levels of certifications that people want. Some are just tool certifications such as ACE or the MCFE. Now, Becky, I'm wondering, what certification would you recommend that people invest their own money into to get into digital forensics?
You know me, I'm going to go after the CFCE through IASIS. It is the best certification. It's the best bang for your buck. You know, it is an investment, but if you're going to invest money into getting a certification, a lot of jobs will post that having this certification, as well as, you know, many teaching jobs, even university job positions, they want that CFCE because it is one of the best certifications out there.
And even law enforcement, many agencies will say, like, you'll get this job, but within so much time, you've got to be able to obtain that CFCE certifications. And there's a whole lot of reasons for it, but really, it's going to get you prepared to actually get out there and work a case. And that's why Becky and I both strongly recommend you invest your own hard-earned dollars into that certification.
That's right. That's right. And again, going back to it truly teaches you how to understand if a tool is pulling data, if it's actually doing what it's supposed to be doing, if it's parsing that data, if it's carving that data, if it's populating that data into buckets for you to analyze, is that tool actually doing what it's designed to do? And when you go through the CFCE process, you learn that manual extraction as well. So I would highly recommend that certification if you have the opportunity to take it through work.
Now, I think as we move on from certifications, you've got some education, maybe you're in the middle of education, but I want everybody to start considering, what do you want to do? Where do you want to start in your career with digital forensics? Becky, do you want to talk about kind of the different avenues that you can go into in digital forensics, and then follow up with some of the free resources to get you on the right track of those different paths?
Absolutely. And Stacy and I started when this was not digital forensics. We were learning a trade, and then we started in the process of becoming digital forensic examiners with the FBI. So when we were going through our degree program, we were not focused on digital forensics. I believe you were focused on programming, and I was focused on information technology. So when Stacy and I got into digital forensics, there weren't a lot of different forensic paths. So we're talking, we learned Windows first, and then we learned mobile devices. Now you have Windows, mobile, Mac, you have cloud, networking, you have drone, vehicle forensics. There are so many different avenues to take in forensics. You can become a Jane of all trades or a Jack of all trades, or you can just be very focused. Stacy's really focused in the mobile area, where I'm really focused in the cloud area. So where I can walk you through a business email compromise or a cloud compromise environment, Stacy can walk you through an Android device and an iPhone extraction, reading the databases, understanding the structures, being able to pull that data. So you can go into and find free training for a lot of these courses, a lot of these areas, but you also have to understand free training, it's not all the same. So when you're looking at your training, make sure that it is within that area. You can take a lot of training out there. You can learn something every time you take a class, but just focus on What are you most interested in? Are you most interested in Windows? Well, what kind of training can you get to learn more about the Windows environment? Are you more focused in cloud? What kind of training can you get in AWS, Azure, Google? And I actually shared a few of these on LinkedIn earlier in the week where I found a few classes that are free, that the training is free. And quite honestly, it's really good training. Now, is there a certification that goes along with that you might have to pay for, but it might not be a really high cost paying certification? Or is it just taking a course? And it just helps you gain knowledge so that when you're going into a job interview, you can talk at that fundamental level of, I understand the concepts, methodologies, the processes, the procedures in digital forensics, and very specifically in cloud or in mobile. What do you think, Stacy?
Yeah, I think that's a great way to sum it up, that there's all these different avenues, but I also think we should level set here again with expectations. I've had people reach out and they want to do very specific things, very niche things. And that is probably going to come with your more seasoned examiner to be able to niche down into something. Some people want very specific, financial cyber crimes and things like that. That can be very complicated to investigate. So I think we mentioned it at the beginning. You're probably going to start off with Windows. But again, that's where you're breaking into digital forensics. And then as you get more experience, you've got the 5 years, you can start climbing that ladder internally, whether it's just through, more advanced complicated cases being given to you, or there are promotion abilities internally, or maybe you leave your organization and take a step up somewhere else. So I hope that helps when people are like, well, why aren't I getting this job, and why is it asking for 5 years, 10 years of experience? It may not be an entry-level job, even though it just says digital forensic examiner. So read some of those job descriptions, and if it's very specific, even though it doesn't say entry-level or just says digital forensic examiner, it probably really isn't a digital forensic examiner entry-level position. It's not the start.
That's exactly right. Right. And going into some of these interviews nowadays, when it comes to digital forensics, you might be given a problem. I know someone who was applying for a job and they were going into the interview. They interviewed with a panel of personnel, and then they were handed a problem. And that problem was on a device, and they were told to extract what was on the device and write a report and submit it within 24 hours. They knew nothing about it. They knew nothing about what was on it. And they had some really quick answers that they needed to provide. So know that you might go into an interview and you might walk out with some type of a problem to show that you have some of the skills that they need. And the other part about that is, if you don't know, you don't know. And don't pretend like you do know. Just say you don't know. And that's going to go a long way, because if you say you don't know and you're willing to learn, people are going to take that as a team player approach. Don't feel like you have to know everything, because we don't know everything, and we do have a huge network that we can reach out to. Even with IASIS, we have a listserv where we can communicate back and forth about some problems that we're seeing and how we can achieve some results or get some tips and tricks from that. So know that, build your network, build your community, play a moot interview with someone back and forth, have an understanding of what you're expected to do so that you can be prepared to answer those technical questions as well as those soft skill questions in an interview.
And they might not even clearly tell you. They might just say you're scheduled for an interview. And if it's very vague like that, certainly email back whoever you're coordinating with and be like, can you tell me what I should expect in this interview? Because it's certainly very common to have to answer at least a handful of technical questions on that first level of interviews. And, that happened to me one time. I just thought this was like the first level interview, and no, it was like a panel, and here's like 2 hours worth of technical questions. you have to answer. And luckily I was far enough in my career, like that really wasn't an issue, but there was a couple of things, that I didn't know. There was one where, I was like, oh, I don't know. And then we went a couple further questions down the line, and one of their questions answered a previous question. And I was like, oh, I would like to go back to question number 13 and change my answer. And they're like, oh, you see what we're doing? I'm like, I do see what you're doing here, and so that's kind of this stuff, that makes you look good in an interview, even though you feel like, oh, I can't believe I missed it. But that happens all the time. Sometimes you just don't remember whatever. And then as soon as you walk out of the room, you know the answer. But overall, they're looking for how you can communicate and carry yourself during these interviews, because they're thinking, okay, how can we work with this person? Will they be able to testify? Will people be able to understand what they're saying? Now, Becky, we've been talking a lot about digital forensics, and I'm sure many of our listeners are familiar with the acronym DEFIR, DFIR. And so many times you're seeing digital forensics and incident response grouped together. And so I think it's important for us to go over sort of like, how are they different? So Becky, do you want to run us through that?
Sure, absolutely. So there is a difference where the forensics is going to be the same, but the process is going to be different. So with incident response, you're going to have something that triggers an alert or an incident, referring to incident response. And then there's going to be a set group of personnel, maybe one, maybe a whole team of security operations specialists that are now trying to figure out if this is a false positive or if this is a legitimate incident. And they might elevate it up to someone else that now can do a more in-depth review. So where your digital forensics and incident response, in the digital forensics world of you get some data from an incident. Maybe you're taking data from the network. Maybe you're taking data from logs. Maybe you're taking data from a cloud environment, from a business email compromise, from a platform that hosts their email. You're now taking a lot of information that's coming at you very quickly because there's an incident, and you're trying to populate that to tell a story. You're likely not going to be working on that individually by yourself the whole time. You're going to have different people throwing different things at you. You might be working the digital forensic side of an incident response while a scoping call and management is putting together a conversation about what happened. So once the incident is determined that it is elevated, it needs an investigation, there is an insider threat, or there is ransomware, or it is a phishing attack, or it is a DDoS attack, whatever the case may be, now you're digging in with your digital forensics tools. Now you're pulling images off of computers and you're throwing them into your tools and you're finding the bad. I say all that to say that incident response now moves into the investigative phase where you get digital forensics. Digital forensics, where Stacy and I learned our bread and butter, was doing the right blocking, forensically preparing, putting it up into a forensic tool, analyzing it, archiving it, putting it back into evidence control, writing a report, writing supplemental reports. So you're still doing an investigation, you're still doing the digital forensics, you're still identifying the artifacts, but how you get to the beginning of the case depends on what role you're in. And many of the digital forensics that we started out in doing is going to be at that law enforcement level. Many of that is going to be at a situation where you're going to be looking more at criminal cases. Incident response is going to be more of an environmental situation where an incident occurs and now it needs to move into a digital forensic investigation.
That is great. And I think one way to sum it up is the incident response is just like you're saying, you're responding. So it's like, what the heck is happening? Stop it. Okay, now it's stopped. Let's go backwards and investigate. And that becomes the digital forensics part of that. So I hope that helps everyone kind of fill out the differences there. And now I think it's a great time to move on to getting the job. And Becky and I thought it was really important to level set again here with some more realistic expectations. This may be shocking, I don't know, but there is really almost no remote work in digital forensics, especially if you're in a law enforcement capacity. And that is because you have to have your hot little hands on the evidence. And I know there's like network and cloud and all this stuff, but starting out, I want you to have this expectation that you are not working from home. You have to physically go somewhere and touch evidence and things. And then you also have to do like work odd hours sometimes. If there's an emergency or exigent situations, you could be working long periods of times. You could be called back into the office in the middle of the night to do something. And that could happen whether you're law enforcement or corporate. So that's just something to be aware of. And the other thing is like, what do you want to do? So Becky, do you want to talk about like some of the different questions you might ask yourself or things to consider when you're kind of figuring out, well, where do I want to go? Where do I want to start in digital forensics?
Right. And I'll say this. I'll say that law enforcement's going to get you in the digital forensics world is going to get you a very broad experience in maybe you're going to be that person that is going in after the scene is secure and collecting all the evidence items and mapping out the crime scene to know where all the digital evidence items were and using that chain of custody and getting it into evidence control. And so you can do that at the county, the state, the local level. And then you can...
And I'm going to jump in here, Becky. And you can do it without a gun. You do not have to be a sworn law enforcement officer. Neither Becky or I was. And so you didn't have to deal with I don't know how to sum it up, the stuff of being a cop, for lack of better way to say it, you know? We were just there, like, we had this narrow focus. We didn't have to do all the other things. We did the digital forensics.
Right. We were still many times in control and command on scene because our law enforcement officers that we were working with had questions about what they need to be doing once the scene is secured, once the subject is taken care of. And so with that being said, what we did was we would focus on how do we prevent any manipulation, alterations, edits to any of this data that's in this room and in this scene. And so you could be the first one on scene, and you could be the one that is tagging and bagging and taking that evidence back to the evidence control room. You could also be the one that is going to have to image it on scene because maybe it's encrypted and you have to go ahead and while it's unlocked because you don't have any decryption keys or you don't know how it's encrypted, go ahead and image it on scene. If you're doing the job right, you're going to take a memory capture. So there's a lot of parts to being in digital forensics, and in law enforcement, you're going to be able to learn how to think on your feet, that critical thinking skill, the troubleshooting techniques, the technical skills, they're all going to come into play right there on scene. It's quick thinking, decision making, things you're going to have to make choices about. Versus in a corporate environment, you might be working on the network and you might just be getting logs and you're analyzing those logs and you're using the tools to analyze the logs, but you're also in a room full of other people that are also have a piece to that. So going back to what Stacy said about not working remote, working odd hours, working during emergencies, all that type of stuff, you're getting a lot of that knowledge from law enforcement. And, we call it law enforcement, but then, you have your attorney general's office that have a cybercrime unit that they go out and do the same thing. So it's some form of law enforcement, but then
maybe a better term would be like in the criminal justice system, because there's people both on, there's the public defender's office, there's, the United States Attorney's office. So there's certainly different pieces to it. So it's not just being a cop again.
Right. In that criminal, like you said, in that criminal justice versus when you move over into corporate, it's more of the civil regulations, the compliance, the governance of the environment. And so now you have to follow those guides to be able to know what you're doing when it comes to digital forensics.
Yeah. And so the other thing to think about with law enforcement, criminal justice types jobs is the different types of things you will be exposed to. Obviously, it's crime, but sometimes you have to look at nasty things repeatedly for many different cases. I would say in the FBI, like 80% of my time was spent, well, not 80%, but I don't know, like 80% of the cases involved at least some aspect of looking at something horrible or reading about plots to do something horrible, things like that. So that's one thing to consider. If you don't want to do that, then criminal justice system jobs are not for you. You're going to be wanting to look more on the corporate side of the house. And part of looking for these jobs is starting to read those job descriptions, see what they're asking you for or telling you that you're going to have to be doing for work, and then start looking up some of these companies, because you can go to like glassdoor.com and research the reputations of these companies. You can also do the inverse. Maybe you know where you want to work. Maybe you can't relocate to get that entry level job at a local police department. So where are the companies you want to work for, and start following their job postings and see what they are saying there that they want you to have to get in, see what they're saying you're going to be doing. And again, sometimes the job titles might be a little bit off because with like incident response and stuff, a lot of that is going to be under like a SOC analyst, security operations analyst, stuff like that. But you're actually doing a lot of the incident response. So you're doing a lot of work just slightly differently that you would do as a digital forensic examiner. And so you've used the tools, and that could also be a great way to break into the door and then slide over later and do the digital forensics. And I think this is what people are missing. They think they can start at the top and do one specific things, but it is taking some pivoting. And I mean, yeah, Becky and I were both in the FBI, and then we got into digital forensics. But even once we were in there, we still had to work our way up. And, this is us talking 20 years later. So this is the experience we have now, finally, and now we want to help you get your foot in the door. And so hopefully this can kind of clear up some of the misunderstandings. And I know on job postings, people have written in like, all of these certifications are too much. And I'm sorry, I think we already harped on this. But again, they're asking for that because they do want someone more mature in terms of experience level.
Yep. So what would you say is going to set someone apart during an interview in digital forensics?
I really think it's going to be how you carry yourself in that interview, how you present information, how you can kind of interact. Can you build some camaraderie with the other people there, or are you just looking down at your shoes and mumbling? Because if you can't speak and talk, I mean, that's going to be a huge hindrance. And I don't know if this is some of the problems people are facing, is they're getting all these interviews, but they're not getting past it. And they're chalking it up to, I don't have the qualifications. You might look great on paper, but then you're never getting any more interviews. So, maybe that's where you need to invest some time into public speaking, or you just need to practice interviewing. Like there's Toastmasters, and just role play, get somebody to help you with interview questions, and just practice. Even if it's recording yourself on Zoom and then playing it back and just seeing what you look like. And maybe you have a buddy from school and you can do it together, and then you can play devil advocates and you can pick on each other and have some fun doing that, and then laugh about it 20 years down the road. Remember when? And you'd be like, and then, but hey, I helped you get that job. So that's great. Right. So I don't know. What else about the what else do you think, Becky? What did I miss on the interview? What can set you apart?
I think that being able to say that you have done projects, whether those projects are within school or they are within, you build your own home lab and you download your own image data sets and you analyze what you see there. So being able to set yourself apart by being able to talk about projects. So Stacy and I could sit here and tell you about a lot of cases that we've worked and a lot of examples that we've come across. And some of these examples, no one had ever seen before. So we were pioneers in trying to figure things out. You can do the same thing, but you have to have some context to speak about. And to do that, go take some of these capture the flag competitions.
Yes.
Go.
Lots of capture the flags are out there.
Absolutely.
And they're free. But they're giving you real experience, thus stuff to talk about, like Becky was saying. Go on.
That's right. And build your own lab. And as you build your own lab and you take these capture the flags, you take on some special projects, you just learn. You're helping yourself be able to speak about the concepts, the methodologies, the processes, the technical details that you're involving yourself in, that's what's going to help set you apart during an interview.
And of course, another way to get your foot in the door is internships. I was just looking, and I, in fact, did find a paid internship. I think it was was it $20 or $30 an hour? And in my opinion, that's certainly not bad for an internship, because when I was young, a long time ago, internships were unpaid labor. I think it's great that you can, get that experience and get paid for it. And FBI post internships. A lot of people that get those FBI internships get employment later on. Unfortunately, right now, the federal government is at a hiring freeze. So that's not a great place to be looking right now, but there are certainly jobs out there. And we've also talked repeatedly about just getting into something and then pivoting and working your way up. I think help desk is a great option. And I know there's some people who are out there saying, stop saying you got to start at help desk. Well, help desk is really going to make you flex your problem solving and critical thinking powers. And then on top of that, if you want to move up, if you like that company and want to stay there, you already know everybody because you've been helping them. And if you have a great reputation, they're going to want to invest in you and keep you there because you are the known good commodity. So people do promote up. It does happen. So again, pivot.
Exactly. And being able to start, I did it with the FBI. I started at the FBI in 1997 when, as a file clerk, and realized very quickly within a year I wanted to do something different. And I put myself back through school and I went and got a degree in information technology. And I worked a couple of different jobs. But every time I moved along, I knew a little bit more about the FBI and I knew a little bit more about the process. And so by the time I got to my information technology role, I already knew a lot of the processes of the FBI. So that helped me internally. So you're right in starting someplace, entry level, get your foot in the door, system admin, help desk, network admin, learn about the networks, learning about how things work, changing passwords, changing out printers, like all the things gives you more knowledge about what you're looking at. And then if you're called to a crime scene and you're called to a search scene and you have to collect items from a search scene, you at least know what is relevant versus what isn't. And it's just going to help you learn more. So you have a 4-year degree, you have all this training, you have all this knowledge, and now you don't want to go in as a a help desk person, but maybe that's going to get the ball rolling for you to move up, like Stacy was saying.
Yeah, and I think it's especially powerful in the corporate side of the house, because then your learning curve as the digital forensic examiner isn't how your business works and what it runs on and the network and all that stuff. You already know that. So now you're just dealing with like the data, the artifacts, and doing the investigation and figuring out who done it.
That's right. We can help provide any resources for learning. We have some websites and some digital forensic sites that we visit often when we have questions that we are looking for specific answers to, or specific training material. Some of the websites for the job postings out there are commonly, updated on a regular basis. And so we're happy to share that with you, as well as some of our favorite sites that we visit when we are needing to learn something new in digital forensics. And that's the part about this field that you need to understand, is that you have to have the willingness to constantly learn and understand that technology changes so often, that what you learned 2 weeks ago about a specific artifact or about a specific technique is likely going to change within the next few weeks. And when an update comes along, it may change it altogether. So we'll share some of that with you. And just know that there is a community of people, networks in digital forensics that just become a part of that community and learn from everyone out there.
Absolutely. And a couple things, you can visit us at parsingthetruth.com. We will get that stuff linked up on there. Give us a little bit of time. We'll probably put some of that stuff on LinkedIn. And the other thing I want to say before we end is, if you head to the website, parsingthetruth.com, we are having a little button up there for you to donate to us. You donate to us through Buy Me a Coffee. And what we are going to do with that money is we are going to fund a scholarship for someone to attend the BCFE training at IASIS next year down in Orlando. So if you liked this episode, felt it was helpful, if you just think Becky and I have brilliant, sparkling personalities and want to donate because of that, or perhaps you've even enjoyed some of our previous episodes, please donate to that so we can pass that along to someone else who wants to break into digital forensics.
That's
and
right.
With that, Becky, do you want to wrap us up?
Yep. So until then, stay safe, stay sharp, and as always, keep parsing the truth one bite at a time.